Have you ever felt that strange hollowness after achieving something you worked so hard for? That momentary high, followed by a question that sneaks in quietly, is this it? You thought happiness was right around the corner, but when you got there, it evaporated. You moved the goalpost. Again. And now you're chasing something new. More success, more love, more meaning, more. But what if the problem isn't that you haven't found happiness yet? What if the problem is that you're chasing it in the first place? That's what Arthur Schopenhauer would tell you without blinking. He'd look you in the eye and say you're suffering because you believe happiness is the goal. And not only is that belief wrong, it's the very reason your life feels like a treadmill. Not because you're lazy, not because you're broken, but because you're caught in a trap that was set by nature itself. A trap called the will to live. A blind, ceaseless force that drives all living things to survive, reproduce, and strive endlessly without ever offering peace. Schopenhauer's philosophy is the uncomfortable mirror we all need. It doesn't flatter us. It doesn't promise bliss. It dares to ask, what if happiness is not the purpose of life, but a fleeting illusion that keeps us running in circles?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
You see, Schopenhauer wasn't simply pessimistic. He was precise. He observed life the way a scientist observes a specimen, coldly, honestly, without sentiment. And what he saw was this: life is suffering, not in some exaggerated, theatrical sense, but in the quiet, everyday way you feel when you're stuck in traffic, when you feel lonely in a crowd, when your mind races at night with everything you haven't done. Suffering is the ground state of consciousness, he said, because to exist is to want, and to want is to lack. And lack is suffering. Let that sink in. The very structure of desire guarantees that you will never be satisfied for long. You get what you want, and then you want again. Ad infinitum. That's the cycle. That's the trap. I think of the last time you really wanted something: a promotion, a relationship, a big win. You imagined how good it would feel. You believed it would finally make things click. But once you got it, how long did the happiness last? A few days? A few hours? Maybe even just a few minutes before a new craving popped into your mind. Schopenhauer would say, exactly. That's the will doing its job. Not giving you rest, but keeping you in motion. Not rewarding you with true contentment, but baiting you with temporary relief. And here's the twist: it's not your fault. You didn't choose to live this way. You were born into it. You inherited this hunger from evolution, from biology, from existence itself. And yet, we've built an entire culture on the opposite idea. From childhood, we're told to chase happiness. We're told that if we just work hard enough, love deeply enough, buy the right things, or find the right mindset, we'll be happy. But that's a fantasy, Schopenhauer says. Because the more you chase happiness, the more you empower the will. And the more you empower the will, the more restless you become. It's like trying to quench your thirst with salt water. The more you drink, the thirstier you get. So here's the terrifying question: what if happiness was never meant to be pursued? Let's go deeper. Schopenhauer makes a radical claim: pleasure is just the absence of pain. Not a positive state, but a negative one. You don't feel joy because something is added to your life. You feel relief because something painful was taken away. Think about eating when you're starving, and that first bite feels divine. But it's not because the food gives you some metaphysical joy. It's because it removes the discomfort of hunger. Now imagine a life where you're always hungry for love, success, approval, novelty. That's life under the rule of the will. And most of us are starving without even realizing it. We're so used to the ache of desire that we think it's normal. We think it's us. But Schopenhauer wanted us to wake up, to see the truth that happiness, as it's commonly sold to us, is a lie. A momentary pause in the background noise of suffering. And the more we chase it, the more we suffer, because we're chasing shadows. And this is where the real power of his philosophy begins, not in despair, but in clarity. Clarity about what life is not, so we can begin to discover what life is. And that starts with one courageous move: stop running. Let me ask you something brutally honest. If you stop chasing happiness, if you let go of the idea that you're supposed to feel good all the time, what would change? Would you be more grounded? Would you be less anxious? Would you finally stop comparing yourself to everyone else who's pretending to be happy online? Schopenhauer invites us to step off the treadmill and look around. Because there is a different way to live a way that doesn't depend on dopamine spikes or external validation. So what is that way? For Schopenhauer, it begins with contemplation. The simple, radical act of observing life rather than constantly reacting to it. When we observe instead of chase, we gain distance from the will. We stop being pawns in a game we didn't choose. That's why he loved art, music, and nature, because they allow us to enter what he called less perception. Moments where there is no craving, no striving, no becoming, only being. You're not trying to get anywhere. You're not trying to improve anything. You're simply here, seeing what is without wanting it to be different. And in those moments there is peace, not because you've found happiness, but because you've stepped outside the machinery that makes you suffer. This is why Schopenhauer admired Eastern philosophy, particularly Buddhism, which also teaches that desire is the root of suffering. But unlike many Western thinkers, he didn't try to reconcile this insight with the pursuit of worldly success. He didn't say, chase your dreams and be mindful. He said, drop the illusion. Stop pretending you can have both the fire of desire and the peace of detachment. You have to choose. And if you choose peace, you must be willing to give up the chase. Not because ambition is bad, but because it never ends. And if you don't know when to stop wanting, you'll never start living. So what do we do with this? Are we supposed to just renounce the world? Quit our jobs? Abandon our relationships? Of course not. Schopenhauer wasn't saying you can't live in the world. He was saying you don't have to be enslaved by it. You can still work. You can still love. You can still create. But you do it from a different place, not from hunger, but from clarity. Not to fill a void, but to express something deeper. And when you no longer need life to make you happy, you're finally free to live it without fear. We'll go even deeper in the second part into what it means to live without chasing happiness, how to find beauty in stillness, and how to build a life that isn't just tolerable, but true. But for now, I'll leave you with this. What if the secret to peace isn't getting what you want, but no longer needing to? If we accept Schopenhauer's truth, that chasing happiness only deepens our suffering, then the question becomes, how do we live without the chase? How do we construct a life that doesn't depend on the next big achievement, the next fleeting thrill, the next perfect moment? The answer isn't in abandoning all desire, but in transforming our relationship to it. We shift from being possessed by our desires to becoming witnesses of them. We don't eliminate the will, we learn how to soften its grip. And in that softening, we begin to rediscover something we've forgotten. Peace doesn't require constant stimulation, it requires presence. This presence is not a passive state. It's an active awareness, a radical form of honesty with ourselves. It means asking with every craving, where is this coming from? Is it real, or is it a programmed response? Is this something I truly want, or something I've been taught to want? The more we investigate, the more we realize that many of our so-called goals are not reflections of inner truth, but echoes of societal noise. We've been conditioned to believe that life is a ladder we must climb, and happiness waits at the top. But Schopenhauer shows us there is no top, only a loop. A treadmill disguised as a staircase. So we step off, not in despair, but in defiance. We reclaim our time, our energy, our attention, the most precious currency we possess. We begin to live not for outcomes, but for moments. We learn to savor the subtle, the smell of rain, the quiet between songs, the feeling of being alone without being lonely. These are the spaces where the will grows quiet. And when it quiets, something else emerges. Not euphoria, not ecstasy, but stillness. Strange, unfamiliar, powerful stillness. The kind that doesn't demand anything from you. The kind that just is. And in that stillness, you begin to feel whole, not because you've added something, but because you've stopped subtracting from yourself. Schopenhauer knew that we could never fully escape the will. As long as we live, we will want, but we can stop worshiping our desires. We can stop letting them define our identity. That's the real spiritual evolution, not the absence of desire, but the ability to let it pass through us without controlling us, like a wave that rises and falls. You don't have to ride every one. You don't have to answer every craving with action. You can observe, breathe, and let go. And the more you practice this, the more space you create for peace, for clarity, for a life that's not dictated by what you lack, but rooted in what you are. So ask yourself, deeply and honestly, what would your life look like if happiness was no longer the goal? What would you pursue, not because you think it will finally complete you, but because it expresses who you already are? What would you stop doing, not out of laziness, but out of liberation? These are not easy questions, but they are necessary ones. Because in the end, Schopenhauer wasn't trying to make us sad. He was trying to make us free. Free from illusions, free from compulsions, free from the endless, exhausting chase for something that was never meant to be caught. And once you stop chasing, you begin to live not in pursuit of happiness, but in the fullness of being. And that, perhaps, is the only kind of happiness that was ever real to begin with. This kind of happiness, the one that arises not from chasing, but from stopping, is subtle. It doesn't shout. It doesn't flash across your screen with motivational slogans or glow from a vision board. It whispers. It hums. It exists in the quiet space between desires, in the breath you actually notice, in the moment you feel your existence rather than try to improve it. Schopenhauer called this the denial of the will, not as a rejection of life, but as a transcendence of its traps. He wasn't advocating despair. He was offering liberation. The kind of liberation that only comes when you realize the thing you've been chasing all along was peace, not pleasure. Freedom, not success. Enoughness, not excess. But let's be real, it's hard. It's hard to step off the path that everyone else seems to be racing down. It's hard not to compare when social media is a 24/7 highlight reel of curated joy. It's hard not to feel like you're falling behind when the world is screaming at you to keep up. But Schopenhauer's wisdom cuts through all of that noise. He's telling us what you're trying to catch doesn't exist out there. It exists in your relationship to yourself, to your desires, and to your awareness. It's not about changing the world, it's about changing the lens through which you see it. And when that shift happens, something magical follows: contentment. Not the ecstatic kind. The grounded kind. The kind that doesn't need to be chased because it already is. The beauty of Schopenhauer's insight is that it doesn't require you to abandon your life. You don't have to quit your job, move to a monastery, or delete all your apps. You just have to start noticing. Noticing when you're driven by lack. Noticing when your mind is spinning in, if only loops. Noticing the moment you confuse stimulation for satisfaction. And in that noticing, you create choice. And choice is everything. Because when you can choose not to chase, you can finally choose to live. Fully, presently, consciously. That's not passivity, it's power. The power to say, this moment is enough. The power to stop needing more in order to feel whole. So maybe the real question isn't how do I become happy? But what if I already am and just don't recognize it? What if happiness isn't in the next thing, but in the absence of needing the next thing? What if the moments we overlook because they're not dramatic or Instagram worthy are the very places where peace waits for us? Schopenhauer invites us into that possibility. A life lived not under the tyranny of the will, but in quiet resistance to it. A life where we stop hunting for happiness like a prize, and instead start living in such a way that peace becomes the byproduct of our awareness. And so we close with a challenge, not one of effort, but of surrender. Can you let go of the chase? Can you sit still long enough to hear what your soul has been trying to say underneath the noise of desire? Can you live not as a seeker of happiness, but as a witness of what already is? That's the shift. That's the revolution. That's the life Schopenhauer saw buried beneath the illusions of the modern world. And it's available to us not someday, but now. Not when we get what we want, but when we stop needing what we don't. And in that stopping, we finally begin.